India Fenner is part of the Temple University Community Collaborative. I don't think this is correct. She is from Philadelphia 215, stand up. Currently in her sophomore year studying political science and African American studies at Temple University. India has been involved with the nonprofit Temple University Community Collaborative for the last 2 years. And really that's an understatement. We'll hear more from her tomorrow when she's on our panel. And being a part of this organization has shaped her into a strong advocate for youth and people of color. Stormy, yes, we have fabulous names from Philadelphia. Stormy Kelsey is our second presenter for lunch this afternoon. She is a youth media educator with the Temple University Community Collaborative. She is also a Philadelphia native, and she will be graduating from Temple University in 2020, not too long now, with a degree in media studies and production. She's been involved with the University Community Collaborative since her sophomore year in high school, and she's helped and continues to help facilitate conversations around media literacy and social advocacy. So without further ado, please join me with a warm welcome for Philadelphia natives, India Fenner and Stormy Kelsey.
Thank you for that introduction, Valerie. Like she said, my name is Stormy Kelsey. I've been involved with the University Community Collaborative for about, since my sophomore year, and I've transitioned to become a college facilitator. India, if you want to.
Yes, just like Stormy, we both transitioned into LC Leader Corps with the University Community Collaborative. Today we will be showing you one of our videos. I was doing this when I was a senior in high school. It's called Erasing Erasure. We did it in 2016, and before we start, I just wanted to know, what do you guys know about erasure or the idea of it?
I think is the person with the mic floating around, or no? Okay. Well, you could just, if you want to just speak up.
Well, when I think of erasure, I think of people with particular social identities or from certain social groups who get taken out of the narrative, out of our mainstream, out of the way we look at an issue or a topic. Like if we don't use a mic, then people with hearing disability, different difficulties get erased from our collective space. So that was an example.
Yeah, that was a great example. Thank you. Sorry. Anyone else have any ideas or interpretations of erasure? We have a person back here.
I think when I hear that idea, I think of Brazil and how Brazil's media is most predominantly controlled by whites, even in the United States as we speak. And so basically we're getting our media from, we're not hearing the entire group of that society where there's a country that's predominantly black, but the entire media sector is controlled by black people. So we don't hear the black's voice in the country. Basically, that's what I'm thinking about.
Right. Yeah.
So perhaps this idea of people who are marginalized being underrepresented, and then people who have wealth or power are the people who tell the story and overshadow those marginalized people.
Yeah, you all raised some really great points, and the idea of representation, especially in our schools, is very important. So this question is particularly for the young people in the room. I'll just do it in two parts. So young people, do you feel like you're being represented in your schools? And if not, why do you think that is? And for our educators, from your observations, do you feel like there's fair representations in your schools? Do you think it is inclusive?
I'm not a young people anymore, But no, at least not in the institutions that I've been in. Well, no, I take that back. We were represented, I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. So it was real black, and I'm black. But we were also right next to Washington, D.C., and there is also what was also real black, but the representation was very national politics, Congress, and all of that. And now I'm at these institutions of higher learning that the numbers do not represent even just national numbers and state numbers. So right now I think we have about 5 or 6% black students, but the state is 22% black. Mm-hmm. And it's a state school. Who should be educating the people from the state?
Okay, so I go to Charlottesville High School, and I kind of want to echo what she said about numbers. So I think we as Black students are being represented in honors and AP classes only in the sense that there are 1 or 2, and then our administration feels as if like, oh, there's representation, so we're good, we have diversity, check. But we're not, when I look at our school, our principal recently told us that 17% of students identify as being Black on their registration cards, but when I look around, I'm pretty sure that over half of our school is Black. So we kind of have like this manipulation of like numbers and data, and so they kind of like skew it to make it look like, oh, there's only 17% people who are fully Black, so 1 Black student in an honors or AP course is good enough.
Yeah. Are there any other person up here?
So I work with schools all over the place, and a lot of times I feel like, and when I'm visiting, I kind of notice things. I feel like that the legislation that has been passed to try to increase diversity and appreciation of diversity, like you said, like someone said, you're checking a box. So it's like African American History Month, Women's History Month, it's like one thing after another, and not really putting diversity front and center in kind of a way that gives everybody access to the stories.
Yeah, well, thank you all for your comments. So now we're going to open up the film that not only India and I created, it was a collective effort between other students in the University Community Collaborative. The film focuses on erasure of gender, sexuality, ethnic and racial identities. So without further ado, here's the film.
Erasure is the elimination of either one person or a group of people from a larger group.
Just erasing someone's identity like they don't exist.
So for me, it means the generalization of a certain group of people. That's kind of like erasing their history. Usually by a major group of people.
Erasure is the tendency for dominant groups to ignore, re-explain, eliminate, or deny the identities and histories of marginalized people.
Most people that I know identify me as female because I still have yet to tell them that I am agender. I go by them, they pronouns. I use gender-neutral pronouns. And they most likely would not use them, so I just decided to save myself the trouble of needing to constantly remind them of my pronouns. I identify as an agender, panromantic, asexual with a very strong preference for females. We don't have a GSA or any sort of LGBT plus outlets in our school to communicate with people that may be like lesbian, gay, transgender, agender, asexual. With the erasure of sexual and gender identity, most of that comes in your health and sex education classes where they only really talk about male and female sexual interactions. Like gay people, they don't talk about how things are different for people who are interested in the same sex or multiple sexes for that matter. And they don't even discuss that asexuality is an option. Bathrooms are usually divided in between men's bathrooms and women's bathrooms, or boys' bathrooms and girls' bathrooms. And people like me who don't identify as either one can feel conflicted because it's, I need to use the bathroom, but I don't fit either of these, so it's kind of like a where do I go kind of thing. And if you say, look male, or you appear to be male and you go into a women's bathroom, people are going to look at you differently than if you were to just go walk into the guy's room, and you would get bullied and harassed for it. Being told that something is essentially wrong with you has to be one of the worst feelings ever.
At first, I didn't even know what erasure was, but when I sat down and thought about it, I realized how much erasure has affected the way America sees my culture, my ethnicity, my race. I see all of the judgments and the stereotypes that kind of got glued onto my culture because of erasure, because our history was not taught in schools, not talked about, not ever even represented. So,
in school, we do face a lot of generalization where we don't have like a specific class just based on Latino history, where we have African American history and we have American history, but there's no like Asian history or Latino history. Therefore, when I'm with my friends, or I'm in the hallway, or I'm associating with other people or my peers, when they're looking at me, they're looking at the stereotype or the representation that they have of me from media and what they know and what they find out on the internet or from their teachers, without a specific 4-week class to educate them about me. And some of the information is misinformed and not partially true.
I've been erased when I came to the United States because my peers around me would say that I wasn't black. I don't know why. I don't know what they mean by black, because obviously my skin color is black. I don't know where else I would fit into other spectrums if I wasn't black. But maybe because it's a cultural association, maybe. But I don't know. They would just say that I wasn't black, and that's basically erasing my identity and where I come from. So that took a heavy toll on my childhood. I didn't know where I belonged. I was obviously not white, so it was a very hard time in my childhood when I came to the States. I identify as black female. I identify as an African female. I don't identify as an African American female. Mainly, well, reason number one being that African Americans don't share the same culture as an African person. So specifically, I'm Ethiopian. I know where my roots are I know where my roots are from exactly, and I can identify with them. I remember this one time when my African American history teacher, I remember she made us look at like the people who contributed to the book and stuff, and we would like go down and look at the names, and guess what? There's a majority of the people who contributed to the book were white and they were male. What does this tell us about the textbooks that we're reading? How come they get to write down our history? How come we can't write down our own history?
As an educator, I was really surprised to learn how textbooks are published and distributed. And what I've learned is that more populous states like Texas and California are often the largest purchaser of textbooks. So the curriculum is geared to the state standards for those particular areas. And typically, Texas tends to be more conservative. California tends to be a little bit more on the liberal side. And so in 2015, the AP US History course content was totally redesigned. The idea was to do more thematic history and not the top-down history of just presidents, but really getting a broader spectrum that includes more social history. And so my students are really excited by that change last year when I taught AP US History. And then there was a lot of pushback in Congress, and a lot of politicians and policymakers felt like the role of the Founding Fathers had been reduced and that was problematic. And so we then were informed that the course curriculum would be revised again so that the American exceptionalism, meaning the uniqueness of the American sort of intellectual heritage, how we created the Declaration of Independence, how we're the forefathers of freedom, that story needed to be told more. And so the trade-off was other voices were then pushed back into the margins in order to accommodate that story.
I go to GAMP, and it's majority white students that go there, and the rest are like blacks and Asians. And in October we do the Columbus Day March, but like we perform and everything, but once we get to February we don't do anything for Black History Month. We don't talk about it.
The curriculum they teach in my school, I feel like that they don't really teach enough about African American history, and that what they do teach is only the basics, how we were slaves, or the same 5 names that pop up when we was desegregating America. Learn about Malcolm X, we only learn about how he did things for violence, and we learn about Martin Luther King. We understand that he stood for peace, but that's really all.
I think I've had pressure to whitewash my course, but I don't think that I've done that. Or I've tried to limit the extent to which I've sanitized the type of history that I teach, especially in African American history, because it's a difficult history. It's an uncomfortable history. When we look at the evolution of race and racism over time, I mean, adults have a hard enough time acknowledging it and talking about the truths and experiences of that. So of course I get pushback, I think, to pull back on that type of teaching within the African American history curriculum.
In school, we're never really taught about, famous Black inventors and famous Black scientists and people who actually contributed to society. And when I was younger, I used to just hide the fact that I was Black behind my Native American heritage by just saying, oh no, I'm not Black, I'm Native American. And I was really ashamed of it for a while because of things that they do teach, like slavery, it doesn't make you feel like you're anything. So I usually thought that being Black wasn't necessarily a good thing.
This idea of Black leadership has always been a part of the African American story, and I don't want my students to not know that. It's important that students know that freedom doesn't just come through the government and through laws and organizations like the Freedmen's Bureau, that African Americans are doing for themselves. They're creating their own newspapers. And so I think for students, having this sense of the autonomy of African Americans is an important part of the story that you just don't get from textbooks, and that students need to know. So I like to take my students to Mother Bethel Church. I like for them to see all the various sites throughout the city where African Americans were really pushing the idea of self-determination and upliftment and freedom.
Well, I think we should update our books every year, because it's something new every year. It's something new going on with things in our society as far as the Black race. So instead of keeping it the same, slavery, Jim Crow, and then Dr. King and Malcolm X,
I think that we should learn more about leading Black figures today, because the people who teach the curriculum, they might just think that their names and that we're just going to forget it. But to some people in those classrooms, when they hear these names and accomplishments that they did, they believe in themselves, and it gives them hope.
I feel like we should have more African American people teaching African American history, because who knows best about our history than us?
So if you have any questions about gender nonconforming or being agender or asexual, you can either ask me personally, I'm not going to be offended if you have questions, or you can find somebody who is allied with the agender and asexual spectrum, or you can just simply look up like do some research and educate yourself on the matter, because it's something that isn't discussed.
So in schools, I think it's really important for someone who is diverse, someone who isn't native to America, to give them their space, that respectable space where they can teach their class about where they're from. Even if it's just one day. I know in my school we have International Day, and everyone wears their, everyone wears their like their dress or like from their culture. The experiences that are in that history, like my experience completely differs from her experience, from Afro-Latina's experience, the way we're perceived, it's different.
I think after learning about erasure, I've embraced my Latina side more than I ever had before. I'm not ashamed of it. I want to learn more, I want to become more educated, and it makes me want to talk about it more to others, especially like my friends who don't know anything about me or where I come from. I want to tell them about it.
Before, when I would tell someone I'm Latina, it's like I'm coming out from this big secret, but it's something that I gotta teach people about. I gotta teach them like why I have green eyes and I'm also a Latina.
If our school had the GSA inclusive sex education and health education and things of that nature, things would be a lot smoother for people in the LGBT community. Or with me specifically, with being asexual and agender, it'd be like, it would let me know that there's other people there like me and that there's other people there like us.
We refuse to be erased.
Thank you. So when we first started like coming together to organize our video, we had to basically this program gives students the opportunity to figure it out themselves. So all the leader corps, they stepped back and we all had to like join together in order to come up with what we wanted to talk about. And it was the hardest decision to make because like so many students had like great ideas. Like we had to choose between stereotyping or redlining, and then the person in the video, Tracy, who switched their name to Cade, said, let's do erasure. And we're like, what's erasure? Like the students in the video explained, like nobody knew what it was. And they explained it to us and said, like, it's just basically erasing your culture, who you are, everything, even like in school. So we were like, okay, we can go with that. And as we continue to go more into depth about what erasure is, we realized that like schools are even erasing like us as like we spoke about it. So I just want to know, what were your general reactions to this video?
I thought it was great. And what I thought was great about it was they were talking about what could be done, what to do. In addition to identifying and bringing voice about the issues, they also said, here's ways that people could act different. Here's ways people could grow. Here's ways that we could think about changing things. So I think that's very helpful.
Right, thank you.
I definitely enjoyed it. I thought technically you did a very good job in terms of being very seamless, and it flowed well. The fact that you had individuals who were speaking, but you also addressed institutional and structural issues. To hear you talk about the textbooks and understanding where this knowledge comes from and who creates knowledge and who defines what that's about, I think that's really eye-opening for some people who may have never thought about it that particular way. I also think it's really important just for any audience, you've made it very accessible, that I think sometimes people tend to assume when they hear erasure They only think about culture or race or ethnicity. And the fact that you were able to provide all of those for people to see and it kind of helped people check that, we may be aware of one kind, but not necessarily another, and that we shouldn't privilege one sort of erasure over or under another, and that it's important that we all expand our awareness in terms of not only what in doing this and how it makes people feel, but how we can also be accomplices to it if we're not aware of it. Well done.
Thank you.
Hi. Great video, just like everyone else said before. But also what I really liked most about what you said was that, and I think this is really important, before y'all created the video, you didn't know what erasure was. But in creating this video, it allowed you all to come to understand, to apply it to your lives, and then offer your critique. And for me, that's so very powerful as youth to see that, regardless of what policies think, of what adults might think of what you're capable of, here you did research. That is research. And that is just so powerful, and it speaks to your capacity. And so it reminds me of the work that I do. I study storytelling, counter storytelling, and this is a counter narrative, right? So what a counter narrative is that it's a way for marginalized groups of people, so racial minorities, ethnic minorities, gender and sexuality minorities, to challenge the master narrative, right? The master narrative is a story or a stereotype that seeks to perpetuate dominance, right? But the counter narrative says, no, this isn't true, this is my reality. And that's what you all did. And so I just wanted to impart that on you and just congratulate you for just doing that and producing such an amazing piece of art, such an amazing piece of research. And I wanted to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so if there's no more comments, we're going to get you oh, there is one more? Okay. Sorry about that.
Cool. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the video. I think that when it comes to this issue of erasure, it's very important that, we do have people speaking up. And I thought what was really important about the video that you guys showcased was that it incorporated youth, because obviously erasure is something that happens not just to adults, but also to youth. And I think that part of the spectrum can kind of be erased when it comes to us talking about this issue. So I really appreciated that. And also, I find it very kind of stimulating, to me at least, to understand that in different areas of our country, there are those where there might be ethnic minorities where they're really minorities in that sense. There's might be 5% Hispanic population in a certain area or whatever. And I'm from Boston, and in Boston it's it's pretty much that white people are the minority in our city. And so I think that it's very interesting that for other areas of the country, there are those that go without learning about their own history and learning about their own knowledge and being able to embrace it, in any different aspect of their life. I think that's really sad. And I really appreciated you guys giving them that platform to speak about that, because obviously it wasn't something that was taking place. So yeah, I really appreciate that. It was dope.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you too. Is there a question? Oh.
I really liked it as well, and I'm so glad you brought to light the Texas issue of textbooks. And some people may not know about the issue of Texas, which is they had a textbook that went into the schools that described enslaved Africans as workers and not slaves in the textbook. Immigrant workers, right? And that came to light. Ultimately, that was changed. But people talk about erasure. And you all mentioned the issue of erasing people's identities and their histories, and that's a great example of that.
Thank you. I think there's one hand in the back.
Thank you guys so much. That was so well done, and just really clear, and just brought to light so many great things. I work with a group of teens here in Charlottesville who are considering sort of becoming part of hopefully we're hoping to find people around the country who are part of a movement to really try to bring education about race and gender and sex that's not just from the sort of great white man sort of point of view into classes that are looking at sort of the AP world. They're looking at more local education. And so right now, they and me with them are at the beginning of this journey, and I was just wondering what type of advice, because you guys have been doing this, like, do you feel like it's important to try to pursue getting the AP courses changed? Is there any movement that's even possible there in any sort of near future? Do you have other thoughts about like what we could do from sort of a either nationwide or a sort of statewide level, or any other groups that you know that are working on this? Thank you.
I feel like the best thing like your students can do as of now is like continue to like, I guess basically not let anyone hinder their stories, and because once you start telling your story, like people start to ask questions that make you question yourself or what happened. So then like you start getting books that say immigrant workers. So I feel like if you guys continue to tell your story and continue to tell it the right way instead of what Congress is trying to do with textbooks, then we can like continue like to progress in everything. That's really all I have.
Yeah. And I can't think off the top of my head of any organizations externally doing work, but I know that it is important for your students to mobilize and like organize within their schools. Like that's how change gets made. So I would just encourage that, and you support them in that process, I'm sure, of course. So yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to help. Yeah, so in response to what you were saying, it's not going to be easy, that's for sure. But there are, like I know Philadelphia, I know best, and I'm sure we're not unique. So actually in 1967, I forget how many thousands of African American students walked out of schools in protest that there was no African American history, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it was in 2005 or 6. Took a long time, but they finally made a course in African American studies as a condition of graduation, and Philly was actually the first major city to have that. Took a long time, but there's also a lot of movement. So within the teachers in Philadelphia, within the teachers union, there's something called the Caucus for Working Educators, like the progressive wing of the teachers, and they've been doing a lot of really interesting stuff. They had Black Philadelphia History Collaborative, trying to like, okay, how do we teach Black history in the post-civil rights era, et cetera. So I think one of the keys, from an organizing perspective, is to find teachers that are aligned with that or want to be aligned with that. So you're kind of increasing the numbers. And I said, I know in Chicago also, the union was captured by the progressive wing, and I'm sure, again, Philly and Chicago are not the only two places. Oh, yeah, sorry. And Teacher Action Group, which it's called different things in different cities. In Philly, it's... Right, but I think it's called, they have different names in different cities. And again, those are like the more progressive teachers who get together. They have book discussions, they have reading groups, they have conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So there are, the question is finding those pockets of resistance to tap into.
So first of all, I want to echo everybody's appreciation of the film and of your work on it. And I wanted to build off of, actually, Nate, you mentioned youth, and I think I wanted to bring that back up also, the idea that youth as a collective are also erased from our history, right? And so one of the reasons that I love the topic of this particular conference and love hearing about all of this work is that a couple of years ago, I went to see a documentary about the Black Panthers and was reminded of the fact that the leaders of the Black Panthers, 18, 19, 20, right, when they started, and that's true for a lot of social movements, right? But that is not highlighted in many of our history books, even when we're talking about, how often do you think about how old even Alexander the Great was, right? Or Joan of Arc, right? These were young people. And we don't highlight that in our history books. So I think just bringing it back, that's also a form of erasure. And so I love that you guys are taking this on, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a really great point. Are there any other comments before we move on? Okay, great. So now we're going to get you guys talking to each other. Oh, sorry. Yes.
So the film was great, as everyone said. And something that I was thinking about was intersectionality while watching it. So I wanted to ask about how your organization is promoting intersectionality and how it is kind of getting organizations to work together, like to push forward the work.
Okay, so I feel like the first way to understand or to identify, or is to be able to identify intersectionality. So like a lot of our students, including myself when I first joined, I didn't understand marginalization or oppression. So to first get them to understand and be able to identify it is a very key step. And then from there, we just think of what actions to take, and that's based on what the students feel is necessary. You know what I mean? Like they kind of decide, okay, what needs to be done from this point on. And do you wanna?
No, that's
okay. Okay. So I have a question for you guys, and I want you to talk to the people at your table. So the question is, how have your opinions changed regarding erasure? What was it or what is it? And how does it impact youth today? And then we're going to share out what you guys discussed.
What's the next question?
Maybe we should have skipped. Maybe we should have skipped to this one.
Okay. So for this one, we got 2 minutes for them to discuss, and then they'll have 5 minutes to report. So we'll start the next thing at 1:45.
All right.
So you might want to let them know, like, all right, cool, we'll come back in 2 minutes.
Okay.
So 1:40.
Yep, we'll come back in 1:40, yeah.
Oh, so you can't even ask the next question. Thank you.
So we're going to give you guys 2 minutes to discuss, just letting you know. Damn, I didn't
know it was going to be that fast.
Yeah. Yeah, because this one.
Dude, maybe we should jump to combat in it then, so we don't like leave them. With some of these, can that one?
Well, that's kind of. Can they hear me? This is kind of the question that she asked us.
Oh, the one in the back. Yeah, she was like, so what can we do? She was asking for her students. So we just did. Or we can just have the last 5 minutes beating up Sharon. Oh, we have it. You want to add in and also talk about what can you do? Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but also while you guys are talking, to discuss what else you can do to move forward to erase erasure. Thank you. What? Why you keep looking at me like that?
What? There's the next panel seems really interesting. I think the students that are behind us, like the girl who just spoke with the fun, I think that
she's on.
I think they're going to speak, and I want to stay for that. But I think I'm going to leave after that. I'm tired.
Oh, we get to leave when we like after this.
I hope Barb don't expect me.
Because if that's the case, I'm
going
going to
until
McDonald's. It do go on till 5.
And Will said that we should be getting reimbursed for food. Like it counts as travel expenses. I just have to double check with Bart, but like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, we gotta eat there. So, and if we were home, we wouldn't have to eat out. Right. Okay. All right, guys. Wrap up the conversations. Now we want to hear what you guys are discussing. Hello. Okay, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. We kind of lost track of time. So would anybody like to volunteer about what was discussed at your group? Over here.
So we just talked about gender pronouns and non-gendering and how it would be nice to have in the classrooms where you introduce yourself and say what your pronouns are that you like to use, and just taking gender roles out of the classroom.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually have I'm taking a gender class right now, and our teacher didn't even ask us our gender pronouns the first day, so. Wow. Anyone else? One more? Okay.
We talked a little bit about the work that we need to do around gender identity and just naming and claiming that, and also around the small ways in which we can provide opportunities to really do some of that work. So around letters of recommendation and using they and them, and really focusing on the competencies of whoever you're recommending for a specific thing. And by and large, I found that when I do that, I get a little bit of pushback and resistance from colleagues that are like, why didn't you use their gender pronoun? And so that creates a teachable moment.
Okay, I think we have to wrap up at this time, but I'd like to let you know that this film is available online on YouTube under the UCCP, that's the channel name, and we also have other films under our What's Poppin' channel, that's WHATSPOPPYN, so you can check that out. And thank you guys so much for participating, and hopefully we see you on tomorrow's panel, so bye.
Thank you.